Hello, everyone, and welcome to Therapists Connect broadcast. So we are here in our birthday week, and we're joined by a panel today for a very interesting, or what will hopefully be a very interesting discussion on use of social media. In particular, us all being therapists' use of social media. So we're just going to have a general chat around this, things that come up, thoughts around it, debates, discussions, etc. It feels very important for us at Therapists Connect to do this discussion today because, as Peter's going to explain in a minute, Therapists Connect it was born in an online world. It's been, we've been mostly on Twitter this year. And so all of our discussions in which we try to include, be inclusive of everybody in our community, all of our discussions take place on the Twitter platform. And as we branch out to other social media domains, will take place there as well. So my name's Kaz Binstead, for anyone who doesn't know me, and I co-run Therapists Connect with my friend and colleague Peter. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. So yeah, I guess I'm going to be thinking about this a little bit today as part of the discussion in my role as in that role, but also my role as a therapist working in the private sector, and also holding various other positions within our profession as well. So that's where I'll be coming from today. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kaz. So, my name's Peter Blundell, and as Kaz has said, I co-run Therapists Connect. I think one of the reasons that I thought it was important to have this debate as part of our birthday celebrations was because, as Kaz has said, Therapists Connect was very much born on Twitter as an online community of therapists. And I think there's been some challenges with that, and it's been really interesting to connect with lots of different therapists around using social media and to kind of speaking to them about the challenges that they've faced and some of the benefits I think that they've had from using social media as a therapist. So all of our panelists today have all been invited along because they've all got, I suppose, a little bit of a different perspective on the use of social media as a therapist, and use it in lots of different ways, actually. So I'm going to go through and introduce our panelists. And thank you very much for coming along to this debate today. Our first panelist is Susan Cousins. Susan works for the University Secretary's Office, and her role is Senior Compliance Advisor for Race, Religion and Belief at Cardiff University. She's a counsellor and therapist, as well as an author, and has written a book called Overcoming Everyday Racism: Building Resilience and Wellbeing in the Face of Discrimination and Microaggressions. And Susan is an experienced facilitator and trainer, and also a regular Twitter user, which is how we met in the first place. So welcome to the panel today, Susan. We also have Dr. Linda Berman. Linda is a psychoanalytical psychotherapist. Before her retirement, she was registered with UKCP, and she worked for many years in the NHS and privately, and also as a Relate counsellor and supervisor. Her PhD was about the effects on survivors of telling their story of the Holocaust. She's worked with and researched extensively the effects of trauma. She's run groups of women who have been sexually abused in childhood, and during her doctoral research, she interviewed many Holocaust survivors. She also has a book called Beyond the Smile: The Therapeutic Use of the Photograph, which is about the importance of photographs in people's lives and in psychotherapy. Linda is also a writer and an artist, and she publishes a successful weekly blog online, which is waysofthinking.co.uk, which is a gathering together of the knowledge and experience gained over her life and the different aspects of her career. And Linda is also an avid Twitter user. So welcome to the panel. Our next panelist is Zena Nicholas. Zena is an integrative counsellor who will be embarking on private practice in the new year. Zena is founder of the Facebook community Counsellor Staff Room, which is a support group of over 2,600 therapists and final year trainees. Zena is also a volunteer committee member at the BACP, and is pleased to be able to use her previous experience in risk and audit for the benefit of one of our professional bodies. Although Zena says the vast majority of her time is spent chasing after her 4 children and her puppy, who she's warned we may very well hear today in the background during our discussions. So welcome to the panel, Zena. And also on the panel today, we've got, last but not least, Dr. Ruth Allen. Ruth is an outdoor and online counselling psychotherapist, professional development coach, and experienced consultant, trainer, and facilitator. Ruth specialises in outdoor practice, nature connection, and working with mind and body in harmony. She's an avid writer, adventurer, and occasional art maker. And Ruth has a book being published in the new year called Grounded: How Connection with Nature Can Improve Our Mental and Physical Wellbeing. Ruth is also an avid Twitter user, but also has a big following on Instagram, where she has over 15,000 different followers. So a lot of experience there from our panel in lots of different areas, I think, on social media. If we kind of launch a little bit into the questions of the panel, I thought it might be quite interesting. I've given a bit of an overview there, but I thought it might be quite interesting maybe if each of us just speak a little bit about how we started to use social media and the kind of different platforms that we use. So, Susan, is it okay if I come to you first?
Okay. Yes, absolutely, Peter. Thank you. Thank you for all those introductions. Well, I came to social media, possibly like most people, through Facebook, and I kind of really didn't like it, and I didn't like my own online presence on there, and I kind of found the kind of inauthenticity around other people's online presence, and so I discovered Twitter through doing an online supervision course, which was one of the most difficult courses I ever did, but it did actually prepare me for Twitter. So I can't remember exactly when I joined Twitter, but and I realised that my online presence, I just felt much more at home on Twitter. I'm afraid I can't manage Instagram because I don't even know I have got it. I don't know how it works, and I can't manage to do it or anything. But I can manage Twitter. I like the politics. I like the kind of discussions. It just suits me. It suits my online presence. So I do have a Facebook page open at the moment, but I don't know how to stop it because it's on my phone. but I had to go on it because there's something I was involved in a couple of months back, and so that's how I came into it, really. And I just discovered which platform suited my personality, and it's Twitter.
I think that's really interesting because I've spoken a little bit about this before, but I had 2 attempts at Twitter. I think the first time I joined Twitter, which was probably about 5 years ago, and I did not get it at all. I did not kind of understand what was going on. It just was so fast paced and there were so many things happening, and I had to leave it because I just couldn't attend to it how I think it should have been used. But then I've used it again in the last couple of years, and I've approached it from a professional viewpoint, from a therapist viewpoint. And all of a sudden now I feel like it makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like I'm connecting and talking about things that are really important to me in my profession. So, but it's interesting that you were just drawn to it kind of immediately when you started using it. Because how you feel about Instagram, that's initially how I felt about Twitter.
So I think I might be the odd one out here in terms of Twitter not being my primary social media platform. And it's interesting, Susan, that you're saying that's where you're comfortable. So Facebook is where I was comfortable. And I think maybe because of the closed community aspect of it. So obviously your personal profile is who you've invited and who you've accepted friend requests from. And then you have some obviously you can have private groups as well. So I recently ventured onto Twitter, and it was a bit of a shock for me how open it was. But I intend to persevere tentatively. And also with Instagram, I have an account, but I've not really started using it for myself. For my puppy, there's loads of pictures. He's got an Instagram work out lots on there. So yeah, Facebook is kind of where I felt more comfortable, and Twitter and Instagram tentatively taking steps. But because I'm going to private practice next year, I feel it is important for me to kind of think about that at least.
Yeah, I don't think you're the odd one out, because I'm sort of a late adopter. Well, I'm much like Peter, actually. I had a first wave of, in a different sort of capacity, I was on Twitter for years, and then I left it for several years and then came back. And my main platform, I guess, is Instagram, but use the two now, primarily use Instagram and Twitter, but have quite different sense of what they're about and what they're for. And in my mind, there's quite clear distinction. So I think there's something about, as Susan has said there, about the fit, how going with the one that speaks to the way we think or see or experience the world. And I find Instagram, working through the photography aspect of it, the longer captions is a format I can do. I feel quite constricted by the 140 characters, or it's double now, isn't it? But I think there's something important about feeling that we can choose the one that suits us rather than have to do all of them. I find LinkedIn's the one that I feel like I should be better at, but it just scares me. I go onto it and I'm overfaced by it and I don't understand the visual. And I'm the same with Facebook. It doesn't look right for me. So I think there's something about letting ourselves off the ones we don't relate to and pick the ones we do.
I think that's a really, really good point. There is something about that visual. It's funny because I recently joined Instagram and I saw your page, Ruth, and I was like, my God, Ruth's famous over here because you've got so many followers. And it's still because they feel like almost like little micro worlds that you're in, the different platforms. Yeah. I know for me, I guess I relate a little bit with what Zena was saying in terms of the difference between the closed and the open platforms. I myself gave a lot of thought to the openness of Twitter. So I think I joined, like, again, similarly years and years ago, and I just didn't use it. And that was because something from my personal life. So I had a stalker many years ago. It was a very dangerous and difficult situation, and I had not been visible on anything, and I had to, as a process, work through. So I was mainly on Facebook. That was my first kind of place. And when I moved on to Twitter, and I wanted to do it because there were a lot of professional things going on in 2019 that it felt important that I did make that move. But it was a really big thing for me. And there's so many things that I guess are going to come up in the discussion today that I had to think through in terms of the aspect of the more open space and the less privacy. But I think that the benefit of that has been a great benefit to me as a kind of a healing and to my own self-esteem. So yeah, that's where I'm at. As I say, I do have accounts with all three. I don't have LinkedIn. Don't get it. But I'm quite enjoying Instagram, although it feels very different. It feels very like insular, almost. I don't know. I don't feel as kind of like I'm chatty to people on it. But I do like my photography, so it's a good place to kind of like my photographs. So yeah.
For me, I came kind of from a very different kind of angle, and I found I kind of had to. Well, I think I was forced onto Facebook by peer pressure when I did a fine arts degree, because everybody else was on it, and I was one of the older ones, and I thought, well, I'd better do it. Didn't really know what I was doing. Got onto Facebook, and then when I finished that course, I decided to start my blog and read up on how to publicize one's blog, and that's why I went on Twitter, just to publicize the blog. But what happened, it seemed to kind of develop a life of itself, and Twitter became a reason for actually going online, not just to advertise the blog, but to make connections. And I started to put quotations on that were to do with life and to do with therapy, and that seemed to take off. People seemed to like that. So it was a very steep learning curve for me, but I like Twitter and Facebook. and Twitter especially, to talk about my blog and to advertise it and to put quotes on. So I think Twitter became as important as the blog by the end of it.
I think it's really fascinating how different platforms can have like a different energy to them, but also then that energy, how that changes depending on who the user is, who we are, how we interact with it. So like going on to Ruth's Instagram, I mean, the photographs on there are just absolutely beautiful to look at. It's just absolutely lovely to kind of scroll through and look at everything that you've kind of got on there. And I think, I don't know what you think, Kaz, but the Therapist Connect kind of Instagram account, I don't think we've really figured out what we're doing with that.
Yeah, it's a bit here, there and everywhere, isn't it?
We just haven't quite been able to kind of maybe think what our identity is there and how we use that space. Whereas Ruth, you feel like it feels like you're really quite defined, kind of, you know, what you want to represent.
Yeah, and I think there's some things, you know, I think as Linda was saying, if your first vehicle, if you like, is text, then sometimes I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, Twitter, you can send out links, it's primarily text based, and the other stuff has kind of come after. Whereas I think it just started that I was interested in photography, and because my work is very nature oriented, it's natural to combine words with the photos, and in a way that wasn't a conscious choice. It sort of evolved out of what I was doing anyway. So I think there is something, isn't there, about the different platforms have their different energies, as you say. And I remember when I came back to Twitter, I was quite scared of that, because I feel that it's known for it to be more adversarial, it's known to be a bit more jousting, it's known to, you know, I don't know, it's sparky, and I think Instagram is, for example, is thought of to be quite, you know, friendly, kind of quite artistic community. It was built for photographers, I guess, and for creatives. And I remember I read something, is it Jaron Lanier, who wrote 10 Reasons to Quit Social Media Right Now or something? I can't remember what the exact name of his book was, but he talks about go where you're kindest. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Is like I feel like a kinder, gentler, softer person on Instagram in a way, and then I come to Twitter and it brings out like a different energy and a different side. And so I think it's like you could be sort of, you could be scared of those different edges of the different platforms, or you can use that to, I feel like I use Twitter for more activism, for being more outspoken. And then I share nice photos of nature and the softer stuff on Instagram. So it's kind of being aware of the different facets and energies, I think can really bring, you can be more strategic when you know what's going on there.
I was thinking about that kind of that space, and how when you were saying there that kind of, I think of Twitter as like that more edgy kind of, I'm not really sure what's going to happen here. And I was thinking what Zena was talking about there, where she was saying it was like a bit more apprehensive actually going into Twitter, because it's so public and it is about debate and discussion. And I know Susan's done for us she did a trainee talk, didn't you? Around racism in the profession and kind of talking about that. And I don't know how you found that, Susan, kind of having that kind of open platform where you're kind of debating with students, and what that was like for you.
Well, I mean, firstly, it was fantastic because it was working with you and Kaz, which is always great. I think...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Things like that are always going to happen. My phone's probably
edit that. Computer, that's the problem. I don't know how to deconnect it.
All right, don't worry.
I think I think so. What I do on Twitter is I don't generally get into adversarial things, and I didn't really find, because I've been talking about race for a very long time, and particularly in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. So there wasn't really anything on there that I hadn't come across before, and I find I found it actually, Therapist Connect, to be a very friendly community. So actually, what they say, what they do, doesn't really worry me. And also, I think I've just because I did the online course, that was so helpful, you know, in terms of you know, watching people's what they call disinhibition, you know, saying things on Twitter without thinking. You know when somebody's typing out something really quickly and they haven't really thought what they're saying. And I mean, it all depends, doesn't it, on things like how, I mean, I've done a typing course so I can touch type very, very quickly. So what looks quick to somebody else is actually slower for me because another person's typing with one finger. So there's all sorts of things like that around it. But I think that I keep myself safe because I stick to my one subject. Now, as soon as I go out of that subject where I don't feel safe, I get, whoa, somebody pounces on me in an area and I don't know what to say back. But when it's about race, I genuinely experiencing what I've experienced over many years. It doesn't worry me. But going out of my comfort zone and going to different subjects, even simple things like putting a photograph of myself up, I think, oh no, somebody said that, I'm taking it down now. So I don't move into unexpected areas.
But sometimes people can move you into those areas, can kind of comment on something you've said. And I mean, that's happened to me. I'll perhaps go into later, but, you know, taking you into an area you don't want to be in. And it's very difficult sometimes to deal with that. Yeah.
I think for me, it's that idea of like danger or edginess, that there's some unpredictability, isn't it? When you're expressing a viewpoint online, you just don't know who's going to respond, who's going to reply, who's going to quote you, all that kind of thing. Which might bring us a little bit, actually, probably into our next discussion point, which is what are the challenges of using social media as a therapist? Which I feel like we're starting to touch on those now. Anyway, I don't know if anyone.
Well, I mean, maybe I could continue what I was saying, because I put that's 5 or 6 months ago. I put a quotation from a book about which was looking at immigration and asylum seekers into Britain, and I thought it was a fairly, you know, ordinary, not anything that would actually make anybody angry, but it did. And I got about 100 or more very anti-Semitic, racist tweets against me, mocking my photograph, pulling me apart, threatening me. It was horrible. And I thought, my first reaction was to want to come off Twitter and just hide away somewhere. In time, though, I decided that having reported it, that I would put it on Twitter, what had happened. And I was overwhelmed with the love and the care that I got from people. It really was the antidote. It neutralized all the evil and the hate. But it was a shock. And it took me a few days to get over, and a few nights of lost sleep. But I decided I was going to carry on. It would be a shame not to carry on.
I mean, that was a massive thing to happen. It sounds really like it was really difficult to deal with. You know, but I mean, I think the way you dealt with it there, it's like how you deal with bullies, isn't it? People being abusive and bullying, which of course happens on these platforms. I don't think we can avoid this discussion without talking about that. You know, and actually, well, am I going to be bullied out of my space just because I've put something up that somebody disagrees with? Am I going to allow myself to be abused? And I'm glad you were able to report that stuff. But also that you were able to kind of say, no, I'm not leaving. Actually, I'm staying here. And I think that's part of the unpredictability that we're talking about here. I mean, Pete even said to me earlier on, he said, oh, I've already had a Twitter debate with someone this morning. And I was like, what? I missed that. And I think, you know, we get it. We get kind of things come up at Therapists Connect because we are trying to do what is, I think, you know, a challenge in some ways, being inclusive of everybody. Now, the way we see that is people. We see people as people, and we want to be inclusive of all humanity and all difference, however that comes. But of course, then there are areas where, you know, I don't know, like there's things in our profession, for example, that you either agree with or you disagree with, and that Peter and I are even going to have views because we're professionals, we disagree with or we agree with. And then there's a kind of, I don't know, like something can get picked up either straight away or something can be picked up a few days later. And then suddenly it's there. And as Linda, as you were saying there, you're kind of pushed into a space that you thought, I've just got up today and I was going to do this, this and this. And now I kind of am in this place. And then you have to make that decision. Do you there and then tackle that? Do you get into discussion? When do you get into discussion? When do you not? I think it can be really tricky to manage.
And it blurs the boundaries, doesn't it? As you say, but it's very much it quickly blurs the boundaries about who we are and what we're there for and what our values are. And it sits between the personal and professional domains. So if you don't have a clear idea, am I here as a therapist or am I here in something other than being a therapist, then it can all get kind of quite mixed up. And even if you try and keep some clarity around that, as Linda alludes to there, people draw you out anyway. And that's just one of the challenges, isn't it? Is like, where is my footing in this strange new world? And I think it surfaces potentially then quite a lot about how comfortable we are in being seen or being challenged or being exposed or being called in or called out. And it can surface that. And I felt that quite a lot this year. You dip your toe in and then you have to deal with what comes in a way, and that can surface some quite old stuff, I think.
Yes, and it's a shock sometimes. I mean, I find myself feeling shocked at those kind of responses, not only in a racist area, but other responses that to me are just sort of, I put on something that feels quite innocent, and it'll get a response that just, I think, where did that come from? Of course, there is always the blocking facility, which
I found it's really challenged me in terms of my growing up needing to be the good girl and needing to get things right and to be fair and moderate. So if I put something out and it's a bit edgy or I've been a bit quick or something I've really felt but have felt kind of always okay to express, if it's not universally loved, then what happens to the good girl in me? Yes, so there's some interesting things there about, what is.
Yeah, it's really about not taking on other people's projections, but it's very hard, isn't it? Sometimes.
But that's strange because I think it can come in lots of different ways. So when we were doing the scoped debates, in my mind, I was very much about this debate's really important and it needs to be out there, and that was my focus. And we did them and we put them out there and wanted to kind of spread that message so people could see them. But then I put myself out there, so I take responsibility for that. But to go into a Facebook group, say, and see people discussing you and your performance on the debate was a very odd experience, because it was all in my head. I'm thinking it's about the scope debate, but actually, of course, it's about the personalities are there. Of course, about who said what, how they said it. And there wasn't anything particularly harsh. It was just very odd to be, oh, that's me. People have debating me in this group. And I'd not experienced that before. And it was odd. It was just very odd. And I had to take some time to kind of think, oh, actually, am I happy with this? Do I want to actually be that person that's debated and talked about? It's very strange. But I'm wondering, Zena, because you've got your Facebook group. So I feel like our Therapist Connect community is quite open. So we kind of interact with the community, but it's just kind of there. But you're kind of like the gatekeeper to a whole community, aren't you, in terms of the counsellor's staff room?
Yeah, and I think I was thinking, listening, it's like worth maybe highlighting, because we obviously work in mental health, and it won't suit everyone to be on Twitter. You don't have to put yourself through these situations. It's kind of a decision that we can choose not to partake and not. So I'd hate to think that people felt that they had to have that presence in the open sort of social media platforms like Twitter. So yeah, my presence is in a closed Facebook group. So, and as admin, you know, I've kind of created the boundaries and the rules around that, and I have a team as well that helps in the moderation. So yeah, that feels like a safe place. I mean, it's not perfect, and private is not private on social media anywhere. And when, you know, we all have to realize that, because it doesn't matter how careful you are, even if you could 100% guarantee in a closed group that everyone was who they said they are, there's nothing to stop someone taking a screenshot of something and take, you know, even if we have strict rules against that, there's nothing to stop that. But you know, we do the best we can to make sure that people are, and we do ask a lot of questions, and we do try and check to make sure everyone is a therapist or a trainee. And yeah, we strongly moderate, you know, and we're very clear on the purpose of the group, which is a support group primarily. We do training, you know, we have lives every week, and we have competitions, and we have chit chat. We have all sorts of stuff for group bonding. But the aim though is that we feel comfortable enough to reach out for support if we need it. And for me, that feels important in our profession. It's particularly important when the group started in March, actually at the beginning of lockdown, but just generally because a lot of us work quite isolated. Yeah, and it can be, you know, there's that thing, it can be harder for the helper to reach out for help sometimes. And it's, yeah, we have this lovely community that feels warm and safe. So yeah, when I stepped out on Twitter, that felt really different. That just, you know,
I was thinking about that. Sorry, I was thinking about that contained space in your group, which is, you know, it is closed, but whereas the Twitter community is, I mean, we don't define who is in and out of the Therapist Connect community. It's just the therapists who engage with it. So it's a different space, isn't it? It's really,
and I think we're talking here about the, you know, there's the side that's a challenge in terms of the community. But one thing that I have found, you know, I found a lot of joy in the kind of, in the connecting. One of my biggest challenges on social media is actually when you look at something like Instagram, which I set up to speak more to, I suppose, potential clients. I see that Twitter is more for me about professional kind of links and contacts. One of the big challenges I've had is when are you ever offline when you're online? How are you ever off duty, or when? And it's been a problem for years for me of getting direct messages with just members of public, just people sort of essentially asking for free therapy, free advice. And it's quite a lot, and it's quite regular, and it was getting quite wearing for a time. And I think there's a real hazard there that when we put ourselves out there with some visibility on a platform, that also then invites perhaps an expectation that you can also contact me by any, you know, you can direct message me, and I will be free and giving with my therapeutic time here in direct messages free as well. So I think there's something, social media, I guess what I'm saying is there's a real challenge around expectation management.
Yes. Well, as working therapists, you have a presence on social media. Do you have very firm boundaries about what you disclose? I mean, surely you would have to. What you would self-disclose on social media, because it could interfere with the therapeutic process. When I was a therapist, social media wasn't an issue, but you know, when I was working.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, I've changed because I specifically contract around that now with all of my clients, just because, and I did have a little bit of a debate with my supervisor around that in terms of, well, by contracting around it, are you directing your clients to go and look at what you're doing on social media by acknowledging that it's happening and that you're out there? But for me, I thought actually if a client comes across my public profile, then I want them to have the permission almost to kind of be able to talk about it and say, actually, I've seen this and actually I felt a bit uncomfortable, or I just wanted to talk it through. So for me, it was really important to kind of contract around that. But yeah, I think, Linda, you're right for me about being really mindful about what I do put out there. and when, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And that question that you're saying there about the kind of, you know, the pre social media, I mean, for me, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I have a full private practice, and it really got there because of social media. A lot of my clients were from social media, so in a way they saw me through that and then said, you know, can we work together? So in a way that there was never the possibility of a very clear cut between that, because that's how I've built my work in a way. It hasn't been through directories and listings and stuff. And now it's much more word of mouth, but it's been instrumental in actually being able to build a practice, which is interesting.
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points actually that you both made there, because being kind of a bit of a specialist in the private practice area, I've never got, I don't get messages from people. I shouldn't really say this because it's probably going to start happening, but I don't know. There's just something, I don't know if it's what I put out or whatever, but I don't find clients on social media. I never have. I have a friend, a very close friend who's like you, Ruth, on Instagram. She's got so many clients through Instagram. Really, you know, more than the directories or anything. Whereas for me, it's just nothing through social media at all. But it has been interesting because, I mean, Pete, what you're saying there about contracting, in some ways it's not dissimilar to, you know, if you live and work in the same area. So I live and work in Clapham. So in my contracting, I'm saying to people, you know, if we bump into each other, you know, how does that work, and all of that, having a discussion around that. And I don't think there's anything actually that different. It's being very realistic about something that might happen or something that does happen. I think we might like to think that our clients aren't looking us up on social media, but some of them are. That's just the reality of it. So it's about,
you start from a position of assuming they probably will be, then it sets that they'll Google you at some point.
Yes. And what you said is important about having it as a part of the therapy. In a way, it can be, if it's brought into the room, be very useful, I guess, to discuss and to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the way I do my Twitter actually, and I think Ruth, you've got a point that there are certain platforms for certain things, and obviously I am involved in a lot of discussions about the profession on Twitter, but I also use my Twitter profile. I do use it for myself, so I put my photographs on there and musings and things like that. So there is an element of personal. I think probably more so than some other people. I do have more personal on my Twitter, and that's been important for me in terms, again, of like, this is my space, this is me. But again, I have to think about, when I do that, what is it I'm putting on? It feels quite natural to me now. But, you know, if there was anything that was going to go on there, I've got to be ready that if a client brings that up with me, I'm going to be able to discuss it with them. And the way I look at that is very much, I'm a very relational therapist. Obviously, I don't self-disclose loads and loads in my sessions, but, you know, there might be the odd self-disclosure if it's relevant in the work or whatever. But also, they sit with me. Well, when we're in the same room, or even online, you know, they're sitting with me. They're picking up relationally on who I am from all kinds of different things. So I kind of almost see it similar to that as well. Yeah.
And that was going to be one of our questions as well, actually, was around the balance between that personal and the professional, how people have managed that and how they feel that they've managed to do that on social media. Susan, were you going to, looks like you're going to
trying to get in there. You can see me. I just want to say something, because I think that as a black person, I'm going to call myself black on here today. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But I wanted to say that I spend quite a lot of time filtering people out of Twitter. So I get a lot of usually white male, right-wing types, far-right people trying to contact me. And generally they're dressed up in army uniforms and holding guns and pointing them at me. I used to have that a lot more on Facebook, but I do get it on Twitter. I mean, it's a lot more visual on Facebook. There's kind of more space to do the kind of visual stuff. So I spend quite a lot of my time blocking people, particularly white males. I'm really very careful about that. I think that I kind of, because my whole presence on Twitter is about race, I sometimes deliberately say or take a photograph of something that people aren't expecting, because I'm taking Kaz's point. I want people to see more of me than my race, than what I'm talking about, because that's just actually a part of my life. You know, it's not the main part of my life. So occasionally I put something out there very deliberately, and I think I'm very cautious about what I say, and I only generally tweet in the mornings. In the evening I look at Twitter again, so I'm quite boundaries, partly because I have a job in the daytime, but I sort of compartmentalize it a bit within my day, because otherwise I think it would just take over, because I do really love it. I really enjoy it, and I don't know about because I'm a retired therapist now. I'm not really quite sure about the interface between being a therapist and having a Twitter page. But one of the things that's happening to me an awful lot, one of the things that I see is people are DMing me because they want Black supervision, they want Black supervision, they want Black, Asian, ethnic minority supervision. So I get a lot of requests for that. And so I just think, what we're all experiencing here is something very, very different, isn't it? So that experience, that kind of me feeling kind of unsafe in the world, is reflected back on how I feel on Twitter. I mean, I feel unsafe for different reasons, I think.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Susan. That just actually made me think about maybe why I prefer the privacy as well, because I had a situation where my husband commented on something. I don't remember specifically what it was. I think it's something he found racist, and he commented on that. And I panicked because I think in that situation, someone did look at his profile, saw that I was his wife. He's white. My husband is white. I'm not. He saw that his wife wasn't white, and he made just the most horrible comment you can imagine about me and my children. And that's, so I said to my husband, you've really got to be careful, because every time you comment, someone will look at your profile and look at me, and I can get, abuse that I might, not want. So maybe that has actually influenced where I feel comfortable in terms of social media. That's quite possible, yeah.
Well, I'm always looking out for places of safety. Even when I'm in the real world, I'm always I never go out at night. I never go out in the dark unless I feel really, really safe. So I don't walk, as soon as it gets dark, I'm not walking anywhere. And so I kind of hyper vigilant, but I'm also, because my experience has taught me to be so. I've been physically assaulted and attacked many times, and verbally assaulted in the street many times. So I feel I've set up a sort of system. I actually have managed to protect myself so far. It's going to happen tomorrow now, isn't it? On Twitter, but I just block people straight away. If somebody was slightly odd to me, I would just completely block them. I'm not going to engage in any argument with anybody. I'd have actually with the BACP. I don't know if people have seen my tweets to the BACP. So they're the only people I've actually dared to have an actual confrontation with them. Which, I felt it was a confrontation. I felt I was being, an activist, but I also felt like I was also stepping out of my comfort zone in order to confront what I felt that was really, really something, a huge mistake. And that felt really uncomfortable for me. I was right out of my comfort zone doing that. I thought, well, something's going to happen to me. I don't know how, but I felt like something was going to happen to me. It didn't. But I think it's different, Zena. I think being Black online is a different experience to being white. And we could probably talk about that for a long time, but I won't carry on talking about it now.
But, it strikes me that we've not been talking that long, and we've just heard you and Zena's experiences there, talking about racism. Linda was talking earlier about anti-Semitism, and that's in a very short space of time. And this is something that in reality is happening and is part of that unpredictability and part of that thing around potentially not feeling safe in some of these social media spaces.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kaz. I mean, it's not safe, is it? So it isn't safe. So it's about how you protect yourself. I'm always thinking about that in terms of Twitter.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself? How's the right way of framing the sentence? And you know, I'm you know, I quite like it, Ruth. I'm talking about 140 words and it's gone. I didn't even notice that. But so I'm just, you know, I kind of look at it, what I say from different perspectives. How could this be picked up?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Sorry, I think there's a bit of a time delay, so I thought you would finish talking there.
No, I finished, Ruth. You go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's a clunky time. I was going to say, actually, there's something, I guess, about, I was thinking about it in terms of activism, and I've been thinking a lot recently about solidarity in activism, and that actually there is one opportunity, I suppose, in social media in relation to your point about safety, of how do we feel the safe presence of the rest of the people in the online community, and how that can actually benefit in a world where, like you say, going out in the dark might feel unsafe. It might be that we feel safer with some of the people that kind of gather in around us online. It's not as embodied, but I think there's something about the potential of that which is quite exciting as well, knowing that there are some people that have got our backs.
Yeah, that's very important. I found that very important. As I said, there are people there who will support me online, and I've also found that I needed somebody in reality, more than one person in reality to support me. So I felt with the support both on and offline, I could go back onto Twitter and feel reasonably strong.
I think what's just occurred to me as well, the sad aspect of this, though, is if people, you know, of colour don't feel that safety, is one, you know, for me, one of the positive things about, as therapists, maybe, you know, being a bit more visible, showing ourselves a bit more, is to try and show, you know, that therapists are diverse. And, you know, the more we can kind of talk to who, you know, our like ideal client in terms of our experience and, you know, our specialities, the more we can specifically talk to them through social media, the better chance we have of connecting, you know. And for me, I think we want people to reach out, and reaching out for help with a counsellor is really difficult. But some, you know, if there's diverse range of counsellors with different ideas of how much they want to disclose, and for me, that's what I like the difference. So we talk about this a lot in our group, and I, you know, I said just today, I love it that some therapists do this, and I love it that some therapists will never do this. I love it that there's a choice, you know, there's diversity. So yeah, if it doesn't, you know, that I hadn't thought necessarily so much about that before, but Facebook is closed, so you don't have as much opportunity to reach a wider sort of audience. So it would be really sad to think that's potentially another barrier to clients seeing the diversity. And let's face it, there isn't a lot. So in therapy, so we want what is there to be visible at least. Especially now that we're online and people aren't just, you know, limited to therapists in their area. They can actually say, I want a Black therapist. I want a therapist that has awareness of my culture. Then they need to find them. So they need to be visible online. Yeah, I mean, that is the potential, the positive, isn't it, of social media.
And then for me, there's some kind of, and I mean, for me personally, I feel like some responsibility there in terms of ensuring that what I'm doing with social media is if I can, uplifting those voices that maybe don't get an opportunity to speak that often or be present. And I know that's what we want to try and do with Therapists Connect as well, is that actually those therapists who maybe don't get an opportunity to speak very often or don't find it safe on social media, that maybe we can find other ways to kind of give them an opportunity to kind of put their experience or their ideas or their thoughts or whatever out there, I think. But it's difficult. It's a difficult balance, I think.
It's a really difficult balance because it's almost like what I think Ruth said there about, you know, like if you get a group of people, and Linda was saying it as well, that you know they've got your back, then that feels really important. But also there's the other side of it around, you know, actually people who maybe aren't saying so much but want to, or whatever. Someone said to me recently, I was talking to somebody about Therapists Connect, and someone said, you know, sometimes online it can feel a bit like school, and like there's the cool gang and there's the, you know, kind of this type of gang and all of that. And I thought, oh, you know, actually, yeah, I can see how it does sometimes feel like that. And so then there's something about how do you kind of, you know that you've got support. And I mean, me and Peter met online on Twitter in 2019 talking about politics and political stuff in therapy, and that kind of, you know, the kind of the bubble that we were in at that time felt very, very important. But, you know, things move on, you know, things begin to change in all kinds of different ways. And for us with Therapists Connect, I suppose, yeah, we are always thinking, okay, how can we make sure that, or help people, not, you know, it's kind of like whoever wants to have a voice, and some people don't, and some people want to be involved in community and some people don't. But how do you kind of facilitate a place for that to happen in different ways, in whichever way it needs to happen as well? It's definitely a challenge. There's a lot there, isn't there?
That's what attracted me. Sorry, Kaz. What attracted me to Therapists Connect and why I wanted to get involved with it in the first instance, was because I felt so excluded from my course, and I sort of thought, well, and it reminded me of how, you know, that people can have a voice on Twitter. You know, and I'm not saying it's easy to have a voice on Twitter, because it's not. But Therapists Connect has given people a voice, and I think that and one of the reasons I keep doing this, because I know that people DM me and say, Susan, I'm so glad that you said that. So some of the stuff I tweet is deliberately supportive of BAME, I imagine BAME people out there hopefully listening to what I'm saying. And I feel like it's a kind of, because I'm not counselling anymore, I feel like I'm sort of offering some sort of support in a different way.
Yeah.
I really, you know, and I really thought Therapists Connect was something that was going to be inclusive, and that's so important to every part of my life. And that felt possible. So I was just so pleased that you and me, it sounds like an advertisement for Therapists Connect, doesn't it?
That's fine, that's okay.
It's our birthday week.
There is something though, isn't there, about the like you say, you can't, it's very hard to please all people all the time in all the ways, and we know that. But there's something about being aware, I guess, of the possibilities of cliques and bubbles and echo chambers. But also something that I was thinking about related to that in context of this question around the challenges is whatever you do online, you can't ever entirely control that. People will always read what they want, they will interpret things. You can make all the effort to not self-disclose certain things and to control your kind of professional persona, or you can think, oh, I'm being quite congruent and I'm being quite myself, but people will always build their own picture.
Yeah.
And there's something about sort of coming to terms with that, isn't there? Feeling that you're somehow in line with, for me, there's something about, am I embodying my values online in a way that is, I would defend and I would do face to face, and beyond that, I can't control the story people build of me. And whether they see me as just this and one-dimensional, or they see me as, you know, whatever they see me as, and that is a process of letting go. I think.
Well, it's so hard, Ruth.
Yeah,
I
think
That's a great point, though.
if we see Twitter as a kind of very large group, I found if I put something on that someone else disagrees with in a very unfair way, they usually are people who come in and support my view, so that there are people there who will support you, as in a group, as in a therapy group. You're not on your own because of the way groups work. They usually are people who will come and support.
Yeah, I found on Instagram people have, and it comes up with clients, people will build a certain imaginary way that I am, and or a certain, yeah, they'll just build a story around it. And so, yeah, I think I am quite honest and I am myself, but that's not the same as I share everything. I share my address, my relationship status and goings on, my, any of that. But we don't see what we don't see, so we build a story from what we see, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think that just is quite interesting, how we all do that, and we all probably go to that and we take the information that we have, and that can get you in hot water. Or it's got me in hot water before, I think, of people assuming certain things they've watched online, we've started working together, or just expectations from other. Recently had a sort of a run-in on Twitter because somebody had built the expectation that I was to be the moderate one, that I was the one to, to be a certain way. And that was quite a challenge, because I thought, I don't think I've ever laid any claim to, it's not my job to be here and to sit on the fence.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certain people we grow certain expectations, don't we?
That expectations that you've acted a certain way maybe on social media, and that is it now. That is your online
Yes.
personality, and you can't ever step outside of that box, which is odd, isn't it? When you think about, as people, we act differently in different circumstances.
Yeah, which is why it's really powerful to hear Susan talking about, this is my thing and this is what I'm here to do, and it gets wobbly when we go outside of that.
I mean, I kind of, one of the things that I wanted to raise before I forget, and so I'm going off subject now, Peter, slightly, was I find it really interesting the different ways in which white people respond to my texts, my Twitter tweets. I can't even say that. White people respond to my tweets differently to BAME people, and it's also really interesting that sometimes I tweet something and I think to myself, and you're quite right, Ruth, I can't control it, and I try to control what I sort of feel I can. But I know once something's out there, it's out there, and I totally agree with you. But I do find that fascinating. I think, okay, well, lots of white people are going to like this, and then I'm going to get loads of BAME people liking this one. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And I also find it really fascinating what white people, I can go so far with white people and I'll accept. Suddenly I'll say something quite out there around race, and all the white people will disappear from engaging with me. Because people don't. It's really interesting about political views, isn't it? And people kind of see me as some sort of moderate black person. I think they've got no idea of my history and my life, and well, probably a bit because of the stuff on the BBC, but really no idea about my political affiliation, which I wouldn't really share. But I think all that's fascinating. The way in which people relate to me, the way white people relate to different texts that I send out. I find that absolutely fascinating, and the way black people relate and who I think is going to like it or not like it or retweet. I can't guarantee it totally, and then I'll say something and it will just take off, and I think, well, I really didn't expect that. So you get the kind of totally unexpected, the kind of difference between white people and black people, Asian people, Chinese people relating very differently to and of course that's my area, so that's what I find really fascinating.
And it all fits in with that point that's been made around the story that people may build up about you or your identity or whatever that might be. And I think coming back to the point about the however many characters, does anyone actually know however many characters it is? 140? No.
It's not enough, whatever
it's not enough. That's the main point. Whatever it is, I think that, and it would be good to get the panel's views on this. Sometimes it can be really hard to say exactly what you want to say as well in that short box. I mean, I'm quite a detailed person anyway. So now I tend to just do, more than one tweet or whatever, if I'm trying to say something in particular. But there have been times when something's been someone's completely misunderstood what a tweet was, to the point where I'm like quite taken aback, and then I reread it and think, oh, oh, I get it, you know. And I think it can be, so I don't know, I think it can be an issue, but it can also be a good thing that sometimes we've only got a short space. I know, Linda, I'm a big fan of your tweets, as you know, and you're very like short and concise and put quotes and things like that, which I absolutely love. But yeah, what are people's views on this?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle sometimes with the quotes because I can only put on short quotes, and and I'm becoming a master of missing out commas and full stops and going against every rule I've ever learned. There is a benefit in the pithiness though, because it kind of gets to you quicker, I think. So if there's a short pithy quote, I'm feeling, perhaps I prefer them in the end because the message gets there. It's not padded out with lots of words. So yeah, I think I'm getting used to the limitation and actually quite liking it in a way.
Sometimes I find myself sometimes I know I'm deliberately misrepresenting my own point of view because it forces you into brevity. Yeah, and it's like you said, it forces you to take out punctuation and words and all the baggy bits. Sometimes I realise as I'm doing it that this is going to be a bit incendiary, or it's going to be a bit inflammatory, or it's going to come across with a lack of nuance that really I know I mean. And so there's something that, how do we use that as well? We can bring a consciousness to that, can't we? And we can know sometimes we're doing it because we know we haven't got the space of an essay, but we're compelled to do it anyway, which I think is a curious thing, isn't it? That what we line ourselves up for on social media, and we kind of step into the problem, but we do it anyway, even if we know this could land poorly.
Maybe this is another reason that I'm not on Twitter, because I'm a waffler. I mean, I have no idea how I'd get it down to a precise sense.
I would go Instagram, I must say. He got a whole caption.
Any other thoughts on that?
I feel like Twitter has helped me develop my arguments actually by limiting me in how much I can say. I really feel like I have to just go straight to the point of what I'm talking about. And just like Ruth was saying, they're actually taking all these words out of going, actually, did I need all of that? This is what I'm trying to say. But the risk of that is, well, that's mainly what I was trying to say, but there is some of the nuance. Yeah, like the background. Can you assume that all the background is there for me making this point? And I think that's really hard. I've had lots of kind of angry debates on Twitter. Not necessarily me being angry, but people being angry with me. But one of them that stood out for me was around. I think it was Prince William had made a comment around go and train as a therapist in lockdown and do a quick online course. And I tweeted about that. So this is unhelpful actually, because you can't do that. You need to do proper full training. And obviously to the Therapist Connect community, everybody got that and was like, yeah, because we don't want it advertised that people can just kind of go off and just do a quick course. But I had somebody who was such a fan of Prince William, like really hating me because they were like, you're just being really horrible about them, and there's no need for that. But it was just, for me, it was that idea of these, I was in this therapist world of this point that they made is real. I think I really need to highlight this, but they were just coming from a completely different point of view of like, why are you just being mean about them? In their eyes, I was the horrible person who was just being mean to Prince William. And it always sticks in my mind because I just think it was just two kind of worlds kind of colliding really. And I think that's what happens a lot on Twitter is that people just coming from really different perspectives.
Yeah.
Just like, arguing with each other over probably different points actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often from a reactionary place as well, taking the word nuance, which is one of my favorite words actually to do with social media, or maybe what gets lost in social media, and Peter's point about it's actually funny in trainee talk, because Peter and I are really different in trainee talk. Susan will have seen this, because I am the person I will stick to my detailed answer, so the students will get 2 or 3 tweets from me on it, whereas Peter's like 1 tweet and that's it. And of course there's pros and cons to both of that. And I guess I'm kind of I err on the side of I need to give all the context, I need to give all the blah de blah and all of that, because I'm thinking a little bit about I don't want nuance to get lost. I don't want it to go into that black and white territory. And I think this is interesting when we get quite passionate about something on something like Twitter. It can so often go into a bit of a, you know, black white territory kind of thing, and then someone else can read it, like you say, the person who loves Prince William or whatever, and just go, oh my goodness, Peter hates Prince William, and it's like everything else just gets lost there.
Yeah.
And I think go on.
I was going to say, someone in that debate with a lot more patience than me spent a long time explaining to this person about the history of counselling and the training involved. And I saw the thread evolve, and I'm sorry, I didn't have other patience to do that, but some other therapists did. And really, you know, it was lovely actually to see kind of those two people kind of get to the end of that conversation to go, okay, well, we kind of disagree, but we, you know, we've heard each other in that discussion. And I think sometimes that's just really hard on Twitter, because it's that idea of, am I going to commit to this debate and discussion with this person, which could, you know, last an hour or a day or a week or whatever it is, and we make decisions, don't we, about I'm going to go for it or I'm
and when I see people actually agreeing and like not agreeing, like being gentle with each other, it makes me quite emotional on Twitter, because it's that rare. When I see it, I sort of think, oh, that's nice. This restores hope that this is possible, because I think it is very easy for social media to become kind of adversarial and shouting into the void, that it actually feels notable when you see on a thread people having like a reasoned discussion and taking that time.
Yeah.
And that Facebook as well. Sorry, that is true.
Yeah.
And I recognise that, Ruth. I do. Like, I stopped myself from writing a really patronising. I wanted to.
Yeah, this is lovely to see.
What were you going to say then, Susan?
I was just going to say, and I don't know. I got caught up in I noticed something was going on somewhere about the use of the term "bae," and somebody was accused of being racist for using that term. And I kind of at that point used my the fact I'd written a book about race, and the fact that I probably knew more about it than they did, to actually sort of stamp that conversation out. And
yeah, that was me. So I don't mind introducing that, because that was the scary thing about going on Twitter for me. But then also what it did show is what people said about the support aspect, because I had support from Susan and Peter, actually, because I reached out to Peter because I tagged Therapists Connecting and kind of said, I've done something wrong, and I've tagged you in as well, and you know, all of this. But yeah, no, it showed, you know, I thought about that big, and it wasn't nice. And yeah,
but it was like, what was interesting about that is I just said that it's not racist. Edo Lodge uses it in her book. When Edo Lodge, Why I'm not talking to white people about race, she uses it in her book. And the thing is, most of the people who are kind of coming from that positioning, and there's, you know, that kind of positioning, are usually kind of what can I say, have quite polarized views about the debate around race. And for the fact that I felt like I felt great that day, Zena, sorry, because I felt I was able to come in and do a bit of rescuing. Right, I'm going to just say, no, it's not racist, get lost, which is basically what I said. And then it seemed to stop. I don't know if it did, but and I just felt so, I felt it's awful, because you went through that horrible time, and I ended up feeling proud that I'd done something. I stood up for somebody, and I just hopefully stopped that conversation, because I don't like seeing that happen. I do get involved in some debates, not very often. I don't like seeing it happen to people. It's quite brutal when it does happen, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it really, as I listen to you talk about that, and I don't know the particular instance, but it just drives home to me again what it takes something to step into the social media arena, doesn't it? Where sometimes it would be easier to stay out of it. I mean, you do then perhaps miss certain opportunities, but there is something about, you know, if you step into the social media kind of world, whatever platform, you open yourself up to something, you open things up generally, and it brings stuff up, and that takes, you know, you've got to be careful as well of yourself, haven't you, to sort of safeguard your own sort of sanity in that. And
I was just thinking,
listening to you talk, I just think, wow, yeah, why do I need to do it?
I know, but I was thinking, Rusa, like what you were talking about before of you might getting up in the morning and think, oh, I'm just gonna tweet and see what people are tweeting. Do you know what I mean? And you're expecting a nice, safe space and people, I don't know, maybe tweeting cat pictures or something. Do you know what I mean? And then you get on there and something's happened or someone's being attacked or whatever. And actually it's not that space that you thought it was going to be. And it's that, oh gosh, what am I doing here? What's my role? Am I involved in this? Because I've seen it now, you know, and all of that kind of thing. And I think it's a really complicated dynamic there, I think. For anybody using social media, not just therapists, actually, just anybody.
Yeah, because I feel that when I see particularly my Twitter, I mean, for some ways, Instagram is my light relief. Twitter, I go on Twitter and, you know, it's the way that I've curated the feed is more or less a non-stop activism train. So, you know, I can get off, dip off in the evening and go to bed and then come back in the morning and it's still going. And so that perpetuity of, you know, important points. It's like the news in some way, isn't it? But very, very emotive and very powerful, and it speaks to our own profession. And that in itself is quite, you know, you have to decide when to opt in or out and how to manage that, because it is persistent round the clock, which is quite, that's quite a lot, I think.
It doesn't have to be though, does it? I mean, I use Twitter quite differently. You know, I use it to put on my quotes, and it feels most of the time quite comfortable and quite relaxing. And it's a way of, I mean, you were talking about Susan not, you know, having retired as a therapist, and this is a kind of way of being a therapist in some kind of style. And I feel I use Twitter for that too, that you know, that my quotes, I do get feedback to say they help people, and that's good. So it doesn't, I mean, I have, obviously, what I said before, I have had my moments of horribleness on Twitter, but all in all, I find it quite comforting myself to go through the quotes, think about them, put them on, and it feels quite therapeutic. So I think I have a different experience, and I hope, you know, I provide that for other people sometimes.
And I think mine unfortunately came very early. I was like my second tweet or something, and because I wasn't using it as an activist. I was just promoting free talks and things that we were doing in our Facebook group. So again, it wasn't that I stepped into that arena necessarily. I was just completely taken off guard, and yeah, I think it essentially it highlights. You need to understand it. There needs to be some understanding of these platforms before you go on, because there's even, you know, like etiquette. So I thought enough to double check, because my first instinct was to delete, and then I thought, hold on, I'm sure there's something odd about deleting. You can't delete. I Googled it all again, and I was like, yes, no, you can't delete. That's terrible to delete. Although I've formed my own opinion of that. So in my Facebook group, I have a rule to say, I know in many Facebook groups you're not allowed to delete. In ours you are. It's your post, and if you want to delete it, that's up to you. Just be aware if you're commenting that you're putting emotional labor in posts, that these posts may be deleted. So in that small community, I was able to say, this is how we're going to do it. But on Twitter, no, there is an etiquette, and the etiquette is not to delete a mistake as such, but to apologize, or if so, or kind of, you know, it wasn't a mistake, but it was perceived at the time. I thought it was. Sorry. So yeah, there's just something about knowing what you're stepping into, understanding it, because it's fine. You know, we can all take risks. That's okay. They just need to be known risks, don't they? And it's when things that happen from unknown risks. That's what can really just.
Yes, it's scary when you suddenly get an unknown risk that you really don't feel you've invited at all, and you haven't. So that is a scary part. But there are lots of benefits too.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you're right about the knowing, because I guess as you highlighted there, Linda, it's your experience of Twitter is quite different to mine, but that's because I've invited a degree, you know, of seeing certain things and following certain things. And so there is something about bringing a mindfulness of what the purposes are, and like Zena says, what am I doing here? What's it about? A bit of understanding before launching into it. And I think I would agree with that. I think that's really, really important, and something for sort of, I guess, people that are new to it to.
Yeah, but as Zena says, it's the difference that makes it exciting too, isn't it? The fact that if we all went on to do the same thing, it would be pretty boring.
Yeah,
and sometimes those things are about evolution, and that things change over time when you're not expecting. So 12 months ago, I had 600 Twitter followers. So I was interacting with it differently now, so I've got 4,200, and all that change over a very quick period of time was quite difficult for me to get used to, because I wasn't just chatting with a few people that I knew. All of a sudden it was people across the world who kind of, you know, talking, debating, discussing, querying, questioning, and all of a sudden it was like, oh gosh, I'm not really sure how to manage all of this, really, because it just happened so quickly. So sometimes I think, like, you have to find your way sometimes with it, and it changes over time, I think, as well.
And you go from being potentially member of the throng to suddenly you have, without trying to, you yourself get elevated to figurehead and representative. And I guess, you know, Peter's sort of you've had that with Therapist Connect, and I was thinking about Susan, you know, you end up becoming sort of, you're the person to go to about sort of race and therapy and stuff, and then you start getting known as that. And so these things emerge, don't they? As you say, Peter, suddenly we find ourselves in a...
People come to me over...
That wasn't what it was about.
Yeah, me and Peter become the unwitting representatives of Scoped. We don't want it. Take it away from us.
We really didn't want
it. There's so much overlap, though, in what we're talking about here, because, again, that's about kind of identity. And I think, you know, Peter's point there about, how you kind of move with that. So if you become like a spearhead or a leader of something or whatever, and people see you in that way, even though you don't see yourself in that way necessarily, you almost like have to think, well, where does this leave me? You know, can I use this social media platform in the same way? And I think there's also, for me, something about I don't know how you move between the spheres of what you use it for. So, for example, I will sometimes, I like your point, Ruth, actually, about it being like the news, like, you know, oh, what's happened now? You know, it is a bit like that sometimes. You're like, oh, what's going on in our profession now? You know, and suddenly there's all these tweets about it, and it does feel a little bit like, you know, 24-hour news bulletins or whatever. But how do you choose how much you stay in that, and how much you stay in those discussions, or how much you think, actually, I want to go back and, you know, maybe post some photographs, or maybe tweet about Butterscotch Angel Delight or whatever. I had to get it in there. You know, and I think also this comes to the point about what Zena was saying, and other people, about being pulled into something, that if you just put something up, you put up a workshop and you don't expect what comes back, you know, how do you manage that kind of, actually, do I want to be pulled in, or do I want to actually step back from that? And I think that's really important, particularly with some of the political discussions that go on Twitter in particular. I was speaking to quite a high-profile therapist at the end of last week, and we got onto this topic, and I made the point to him that actually Twitter is the only place that a lot of people is the only arena that they have to express views on things, whereas big organizations or institutions have conferences and, you know, all kinds of other ways of getting their messages out. Twitter is that arena for people. So it feels really important in that sense that people can talk about stuff that they want to talk about. But then there's all kinds of things within that, like, does everyone always want to get pulled into those conversations, and if you don't, how do you not, and you know, how do you pull out? And all of that even itself just seems very complex.
Cass, can I come in then? I was just thinking about, I kind of would take complete personal responsibility for how I imagine people perceive me on Twitter. So I know that my profile is mostly around race. And so actually what I really want to do in my life is, have been an artist in my life before and a designer, and what I really want to do in my life is paint. But that's something so personal to me. So people are all saying to me, "Oh, Susan, you did that film about yourself and it must be really personal." Well, people don't seem to realise that no, it isn't. So a lot of stuff that I put on Twitter isn't actually, even if it isn't that personal, because I've always had plenty of things to say, as you probably know. I don't run out of words, really, genuinely. Not genuinely. Genuinely. Generally, I don't run out of words. So, I kind of, there's parts of me that just nobody will ever see. Nobody will ever see the sides of me that actually means so much to me. It's not that race doesn't. It's just that it's something I deliberately put myself out there for. And it's a bit like, and I take responsibility for that totally. So if somebody pulls me into arguments about race, I probably welcome it, as long as it wasn't abusive. I think, this is really interesting, and I'd welcome it. And I don't mind being the go-to person about race in therapy, and I'm, I wish I was, but I'm not actually. but that's okay, because I've done that deliberately. I've deliberately put myself in that position, and to me that's okay. But if somebody wanted to start having a go at me about, I don't know, my political views, my political views, say, or something, or my art, or other things that are completely outside of, then that's actually a no-go area for me. Or my children, or anything, or my personal life, or anything that steps out of what I have been putting myself out there to do.
So can I just say, so what you're saying is you opt out then? Because Cass was saying how do you opt out? But I guess we do have the power to just stop and not respond.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've created my own profile around race. So I wouldn't opt out of race. I mean, I know that the Therapists Connect thing I did, I can't remember what that's called now, that thing that I did.
Trainee talk.
Trainee talk?
Sorry, Peter. The trainee talk, it went on for about 2 days, didn't it, or something? And
longer than that, I think. It was about a week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I stayed in it, and I thought, well, it's kind of like about getting about 10 o'clock at night or something. I thought, well, when am I going to stop? But I actually see that's something that's probably hasn't really happened very often on Twitter. So I was quite happy to give that my time, because I thought this is an opportunity to talk about race, raising awareness, and a place to raise awareness, a place to support. Mostly it was actually white people engaging with me on that. And I thought, well, this is a fantastic opportunity, which is what I think about Trainee Talk. It's giving this amazing opportunity of raising awareness about all sorts of different subjects. So when I look at other people's tweets and Twitters and everything tweets, and I'm thinking, I wonder what Kaz is saying today, what's Peter saying today, and what's Lena and Zena saying today, which is completely outside. So it's refreshing to look at what other people are tweeting, because it's not what I put myself out to do. So I don't feel bad about being pulled into things around race, because that's how I put myself out there. So there's about kind of responsibility, isn't it? Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
A bit.
No, I agree, Susan, and I was making a joke around the scoped issue as well, but I do have lots of people message me around that, and students as well, but asking questions. Actually, I'm not really sure what this means, or I think about this, and like yourself, I'm quite happy to respond to all those, because I've put myself out there around that particular issue. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there, actually, and also I suppose we take responsibility, don't we, for what we've put out there, the things that we've got involved with, what we're known for, and the information that we do share. We have to take some responsibility.
Yeah, and the power that you have, because Therapists Connect is becoming quite a powerful organisation. So I kept thinking that scope belongs to Kaz and Peter. I keep thinking, should I call you Pete? But and I kept thinking, they're so involved in this. So how much energy they've got for this? It's fantastic. And I didn't really understand the whole thing anyway, but occasionally I put my something in there to try and support you. But I did actually think that's what was going on.
Yeah, so interesting. And you know us pretty well as well. So
yeah. So I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But also Therapist Connect is becoming a powerful voice in itself, isn't it? Because so you two have become, I mean, we're each powerful in our own ways, and because we do such different things. But I think you do have to accept how powerful you are actually becoming as a what do you call it, an organisational.
Well, I think that's really important, Susan, actually, because I think this is something me and Kaz have spoken about recently, is what are we and what do we stand for, really? Because it's been a very kind of fluid thing, which has evolved over time. But I think, you know, we're trying to centre ourselves around some principles around bringing therapists together to talk about things and have conversations, and also uplifting those voices or those topics actually that people don't want to talk about or find difficulty in talking about, so that we can create, I suppose, a safer space really for us to be able to have some of those conversations. And for me, like, if we stick to those type of principles, it leaves it open so much for anybody to be involved and anybody to come along and put their point of view across if it's so broad. And I think for me, that's what Therapists Connect is about, is trying to create that safer space for us to all have these conversations, really, because I feel like I've learned so much just listening to everybody today.
No, you really have achieved that. You know, I felt so safe coming here, you know, just that I think that's been such an important part of it, because when you have these emotive debates, when you kind of are going to pop your head above the, I don't know why I start these sayings because I never know the endings of them, but, you know, you kind of say something, and then, you know, there has been this reputation that potentially in our community that you could get your head bitten off a bit, and I think that was definitely something that felt different. That's why I went onto Twitter, actually, because someone said to me, "If you heard of this, go on, find Peter Bundle and just you know, start from there." And there's a community and it's lovely and we connect, and so thank you. That's most definitely been achieved. Yeah.
Thank you. But I think also Susan's point about power, I think, is an important one, because I think, again, this comes back to identity and maybe even how we view our own identities. Because, you know, like, I could sit here thinking, oh, little old Kaz, you know, it's just me, right? And yet, actually, the reality is I do have quite a lot of power in different ways, through whether it's Therapist Connect or other things that I might have done in my career. And I also know that I come from, you know, I have some minority culture as well that I may or may not choose to talk about. And I have lived experience of that as well. So I think there's a lot actually that goes on with how we think about our own identity in social media, and then how that influences how we might be on it, you know, and your point about responsibility as well, I think.
Yeah. I think there's something about people will give, in the nature of humans, will give certain people power and will give people authority, and our responsibility as individuals or kind of running a community, we have to work out what authority to step into with some sort of confidence and responsibility, and where not to overstep our authority. And sometimes we're always working with that, aren't we? The tension of that. And I've found that a lot with, which is why it's so interesting. I think I found having one social media platform where I've got a much bigger audience and one where I don't really, and moving between those and how differently you're treated or looked to, and how that messes with your own, and you mentioned it there, Kaz, that sense of identity. Like how then do I see myself, and what am I willing to step into? And where might I not be getting a choice here because I'm being made the figurehead or a voice of something? But always knowing how we can sort of step out of that as well, or feel empowered to. And I think that's just another way that social media is quite fluid in that way. We step in and step out, and we have to work something out constantly in a way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, one of the things I've found that being retired, that the therapist kind of identity has been internalized, and I still feel some responsibility as a therapist, even though I've not, seen clients for a very long time. I still feel it. It's still with me, and I still feel it on Twitter, that I have some responsibility, which is interesting. It doesn't go away.
Are we therapists for life, Linda?
Yes, we are.
We are.
Oh.
I think that goes for other people too. Retired colleagues feel the same. But I think Twitter brings it out. It highlights it for me. I might not be so aware of it were it not.
Well, that's such an important point, and maybe, I don't know, we've quite touched on it, is how we represent each other actually. And that's we represent the profession as well, and that's another side of things when we speak, and there's something to be aware of, because obviously our ultimate goal for everyone is better mental health, that people feel that it's a profession that they can trust and come to, and they won't be judged. So that is something we have to hold in mind, that when we speak publicly, we're speaking for therapists, and we don't want someone to have a negative experience with one therapist and think, but no way, I'm not going there. So but it's a balance, definitely a balance, because I would hate to think that I'm saying, be too careful what you say, because as I was saying before, I think showing who we are and the diversity of who we are as people is important. There's a balance there, though.
Yeah, there is. Whilst being aware also that our clients are out there, whether that's now or 10 years ago, they are out there, and I'm very aware of that, even all this time after.
I think someone said it the other day on Twitter. I think someone tweeted and said, not everything in our profession is tweetable. And it just really resonated with me, I think, because the Therapist Connect community has been about tweeting and sharing. But actually, for me, there is so many conversations that have gone on with people behind the scenes, actually, and hearing about the work that people do that doesn't and can't be shared on social media, and it shouldn't be. But there's much more behind there. The therapy world is much more than just what we see on social media.
Absolutely.
Right. We've done an hour and a half, which it's that time has just absolutely flown by. So I'm wondering whether it might be a time to bring that discussion to a close and finish for the day. One of the last questions that I had was just whether anybody had any advice for any therapist who was thinking about going onto social media. And I wondered whether that might be something we could maybe finish on, if anybody had any suggestions of what therapists could do if they're thinking about going on social media.
I think my advice would be to do a short online course, counselling course, even the briefest of ones. I mean, I found the one I did incredibly challenging. One of the most difficult things I've ever done, the online supervision course. I can't remember people I did it with, that's quite a long time ago. But I personally have found doing that incredibly helpful. So, basic skills online, it just really helps you take care of yourself a little bit on social media.
I second that as well. I think that's really important. It's about being informed. So we can all have different ideas of how we want to put ourselves out there, but let them be informed. So understand kind of the platforms, understand the guidance out there from our professional bodies, and not to be lulled into a false sense of security. I think this is a big thing. Just because other people are doing it, it might not be how you want to, how you want to behave. Like, to consider yourself. I once a risk manager, always a risk manager. You have to look at the potential impacts on you, your life, your income, your family, your everything. You weigh that all up and make take risks, make informed choices, be you, but knowing what you're doing out there, definitely.
I mean, I would also, I like that what you ended on there. Be you, make informed choices and be you. And I think that's one thing that I would say. Yeah, choose which platform works for you. Just listen to your gut instinct on that, go with it, and take your time. You know, some people start off like we find it with Therapist Connect. Some people say, oh, you know, I don't engage in much, but here's my question today, or whatever. And well, that's absolutely fine. You know, pace yourself, do it at whatever speed you want to do it at. Don't feel pressure. And yeah, stay true to you and also your values, the point that was picked up earlier.
And don't panic if you make a mistake. Don't panic.
You can delete on Twitter. You can delete on Twitter.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, you can, and block.
Really? Okay. So that was
Block.
yeah.
Sorry,
No,
Ruth.
there is, yeah. Sorry.
Have you finished, Zena?
Yeah.
Ruth?
Sorry, I don't know whether it's things has all gone blocky or whether it's there's a connection thing. So I apologise if I'm literally this minute talking over anyone. I can't hear any voices, so I'm going to plow on. But yeah, there was something I just really second or third or whatever we're up to now, fourth, everything everyone else has said about sort of taking that critical approach. I don't think that we have enough around digital literacy yet, and we're still working out some of that stuff. I think being clear on what you're doing, going with your heart and being you. And I think, you know, it takes time to work some of that stuff out, and some of that stuff invariably you're going to be working out publicly, and you're going to be doing it on the platforms itself while you're working that out. And I don't know, I created a bit of an online workshop around this because I felt like there's an expectation that we need to know instantly what we're doing and how to get there. But there's something about taking your time, and it would be a shame, I think, if it was so over managed and over kind of overthought that also that spontaneity and authenticity was lost. And I think we need to find a way to kind of work with that, because that's the real beauty of this as well. It's quite candid, and there's a lot that can come from that. So yeah, I really just second everything everyone else has said.
Yes, and it's a process, isn't it? It's a learning process, as therapy is. It reflects therapy.
Yeah, it does. That's such a great point. It reflects the whole thing that we're doing, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. I don't know about everyone else, but I've really enjoyed having that discussion and hearing everyone's different perspectives, actually. And I think it will be useful, actually, for people to kind of hear some of that and see how other people kind of manage their social media as therapists. So I think it's really valuable discussion. So thank you, everybody, for coming on today. Just for anyone who's watching, we have got lots of other birthday events on this week. So please check out our website to find out about those. And thanks very much for watching.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.